Power is fading. Fighting in Donbass has been accelerating in recent days. While hawks in the west are working to support the battlefield, behind the scenes, Trump and European officials who want to end the war are increasingly discussing a swift peace plan for Eastern Europe. Russia intensifies final strike at Donbass before Trump takes office. On January the 20th, Russia continues to intensify attacks from multiple directions, with the primary target still being the strategic fortress of Pokrovs'ke. More than 10 days after the Russian army penetrated the core of the defense at Velyka Novosilka, rendering numerous Ukrainian strongholds in the southern regions and nearby villages useless, they have now cut off 2 of the 3 supply routes to the central defense, effectively isolating the area ahead. This is a tactic favored by the Russians. Ukraine has divided Velyka Novosilka into several sections, each of which can operate as an independent area within the broader defense system. The Russians have surrounded it from the north, forcing Ukrainian defenders to abandon Rozdolne and retreat to a rural road from the N15 highway to build field fortifications in an attempt to prevent Russia from advancing toward the Novochera-Retuvat, Novyi Komar axis. This area is the rear guard protecting Velyka Novosilka, ensuring that Ukraine can launch a flanking attack if the northern Russian forces attempt to advance and encircle the city. However, if Ukraine retreats, the road through Novyi Komar village will be the only safe route for evacuating equipment. The road near Rozdolny village is now fully under Russian control. Additionally, to the west of Velyka Novosilka, there is a bypass road connecting this village to the city of Huliaipol, but it is now under Russian fire. Ukraine must withdraw quickly to avoid the fish-in-a-barrel scenario and escape the 3-sided encirclement. However, Russia has already taken control of 2 of the 3 routes and is launching flank attacks, pushing the defensive line in this area to collapse. Why are the Russians focusing on breaking the specific target of Velyka Novosilka? Because it is part of the offensive campaign against Pokrovs'ke. The same situation applies in the Kurakhov direction, where Russia has made significant progress in the battle for the city center, gaining control of nearly 50% of the area, securing positions in a school building and western strongholds. They have also begun intensifying their attacks on the village of Stary Terny, threatening the industrial zone in Kurakhovo held by Ukrainian defenders. With the loss of this industrial zone, it is highly likely that the entire city will fall. Along with the decisive battles at Velyka Novosilka, Kurakhov, and the attacks in the Selidovo area, it is clear that Russia's recent strategic goal is to cut off the M30 highway to the west of Pokrovs'ke. This would completely change the logistical operations on the Donetsk front for the defenders, forcing Kiev to rely on only one supply route, the MO3, passing through Izium. If this calculation holds, Pokrovs'ke, once a logistics hub, will turn into a dangerous defensive position for Ukraine, allowing the Russians to capture the city at a much lower cost than a direct assault. Russian forces are steadily advancing closer to Pokrovs'ke, capturing more than 20 km every day, and are now only 5.5 km away as the battle for Kurakhov enters its decisive days. The complete capture of Velyka Novosilka will open the way for the Russians to reach the Dnepropetrovsk region in the southeast. It can be said that with each new Russian advance on the battlefield, the advantage of the Kiev government decreases if they are forced to sit down and negotiate with Russia under Trump's peace plan. Ultimately, Western media are getting closer to revealing the true casualty figures for Ukraine. On November 26th, The Economist once again went against the trend of concealing information unfavorable to Kiev, revealing that the country has suffered a total of 500,000 casualties, including 100,000 deaths and 400,000 critically wounded who are no longer capable of fighting. This data is increasing pressure on President Zelensky's power and advisory team. A new assessment in The Times has detailed Zelensky's decline in domestic and international public approval. With the Russian military continuing to score victories on the Eastern Front, and Kiev facing pressure from the Biden administration to lower the draft age from 25 to 18, President Zelensky would almost certainly lose if presidential elections were held at this time. The Times reported only 16% would vote to re-elect him for a second term, and approximately 60% want Zelensky not to run again. Based on survey data from the Social Monitoring Center in Kyiv, The Times bluntly commented that this indicates Zelensky's popularity is waning, and the reality is that very few Ukrainians envision him as their next president. However, unless the Trump administration applies pressure, Ukraine's next election is unlikely to take place, as Zelensky will use the ongoing war as an excuse, with no clear timeline for lifting martial law in the country. Zelensky is still exerting full force to push Western allies to allow Ukraine to join NATO. Meanwhile, the outgoing Biden administration has declared that it will do everything within its power in the remaining 50 days to strengthen its position on the battlefield, thereby putting Kiev in a stronger position at the negotiation table. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan stated, "President Biden directed me to oversee a massive surge in the military equipment that we are delivering to Ukraine so that we have spent every dollar that Congress has appropriated to us by the time President Biden leaves office." On the NATO and EU front, they are concerned about the growing ties between Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and President-elect Trump. Reuters reported that while much of Europe is worried about the return of Donald Trump, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is in a celebratory mood. Trump is said to have called Orban multiple times to discuss the Ukraine issue and asked the Hungarian Prime Minister to express his views on several issues related to resolving the conflict. Trump is mainly interested in Orban's thoughts on how the war will likely end, his assessment of Russia's ability to continue the war, and the strength of President Putin in the face of wartime challenges. European media have remarked that no US president has ever negotiated with the Hungarian Prime Minister as often within a month as Trump. Their concerns grow even more when they learn that Prime Minister Orban has maintained a friendly relationship with Russian President Putin and former President Trump during nearly 3 years of the Ukraine conflict. He has also been a significant obstacle to many policies and sanctions targeting Russia, while also criticizing EU and NATO aid to Ukraine. Hungarian Prime Minister Orban has repeatedly stated that Russia has more resources than Ukraine to continue the war, and this closely aligns with Trump's ideas. Regarding Donald Trump, CNN reported on his new peace plan, mentioning peace negotiations could occur in late January or February. Future National Security Advisor Waltz has studied the peace plan from General Kellogg, who was appointed by Trump as the U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine and Russia. General Kellogg seems eager to end the Russia-Ukraine war quickly so the U.S. can refocus on its main competitor, China. Amid the potential for the Ukraine war to escalate before the U.S. administration changes, another unstable region is also on the verge of erupting into conflict. Why did the Syrian government surprise attack? The sudden attack by Syrian insurgents on the country's second-largest city, Aleppo, marked the biggest challenge to President Bashar al-Assad's territorial control in years. The jihadist group launched a swift attack on the rural areas of Aleppo and Idlib on November 27th, taking control of dozens of villages and towns before advancing into Aleppo city on Saturday, November 30th, hours after thousands of Syrian Islamic fighters entered Aleppo, located 300 feet north of the capital, Damascus, with little resistance from the government forces, Russia deployed fighter jets stationed in Syria to carry out airstrikes targeting the rebel group. This escalation occurred after the insurgent group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, a branch of al-Qaeda, attacked Aleppo and broke the fragile ceasefire brokered by Russia and Turkey in 2020. The unexpected capture of Aleppo by HTS has left President Assad puzzled as he regained complete control of the city in 2016 after expelling rebel forces through a military campaign backed by Russia. Since then, Aleppo has not been attacked by opposition forces. The recapture of Aleppo in 2016 was a turning point in the conflict between the Syrian government forces and insurgents after protests against Assad's regime in 2011 escalated into a full-scale civil war. Currently, HTS claims to control over 400,000 kilometers in Aleppo and Idlib, and has seized heavy weapons and other equipment from the Syrian army. After capturing central areas of Aleppo, the HTS militants are reportedly attempting to take the city of Hama. Arab media have quoted HTS sources saying that the group has begun advancing toward Hama, successfully capturing 6 towns and villages in the rural area, including Morik, located along an important highway linking central Syria to the north. Russian and Syrian airstrikes are still continuing to target the occupied central areas of the city. This is the first major airstrike in the city since 2016. Russia intervened in the Syrian civil war in 2015, helping President Assad regain control of most of the country from dozens of armed Islamist groups supported by various foreign powers. Amid stunningly swift victories on Saturday, HTS and al-Qaeda-affiliated separatist groups also seized the strategically important city of Khan Sheikhoun in southern Idlib province. The Syrian army admitted to temporarily retreating from Aleppo to regroup, while Russia has called on President Assad to restore order quickly. The rapid capture of strategic cities by HTS in just 4 days shocked global observers. One of the most shocking revelations from Western media is that this new attack by HTS on Aleppo was green-lighted by Turkish intelligence, meaning the attack received approval from NATO member Turkey. Over the past decade, Syria has been a fertile ground for many foreign powers, such as the US, NATO, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and various Islamic jihadist groups. As a result, it has become the focal point of both clashes and military escalation. At a time when foreign powers are facing challenges due to the upcoming power transition in the US and Russia, gaining an advantage in Ukraine, Syria, a key ally of Russia, once again becomes a weak point for military escalation. HTS is an Islamic group with the goal of expelling the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps from the country. Like most other jihadist groups, HTS also views Jews and the State of Israel as irreconcilable enemies. The timing of this uprising is noteworthy. HTS chose to attack Aleppo at a time when Russia was distracted by its special military operation in Ukraine, and escalating tensions with Israel incapacitated Iran. Hezbollah, Iran's proxy, which supports the Syrian government forces, is preoccupied with conflicts in Lebanon. Thus, pushing back the insurgents will be extremely difficult for the Syrian government army. The Assad government was caught off guard by the insurgents' ability to attack the country's second-largest city quickly. Several reasons can explain the collapse. Observers believe the Syrian army grew complacent, possibly assuming that the ceasefire mediated by Russia guaranteed their security. The ceasefire, mediated by Russia and Turkey, has lasted nearly 5 years since March 2020. But since then, President Assad's government failed to make any preparations to protect critical cities. Syria's notorious corruption has weakened the military's capabilities. Another unforgivable mistake was the Syrian army's failure to use UAVs for intelligence and reconnaissance operations to detect insurgent activities before the first attacks occurred. Additionally, it's possible the Syrian army relied too much on their Russian and Iranian allies to shoulder the security responsibilities on their behalf. However, the most important reason lies in the competition between Russia and Iran, even though outwardly both countries seem to cooperate closely in the war against their common adversary, the US. In reality, both Russia and Iran have fought together against terrorist groups including ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, but they are also rivals trying to gain the upper hand in influencing the Assad regime. The competition between Russia and Iran in Syria is actually extremely fierce. Russia remains silent and only occasionally complains about Israeli airstrikes on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Syria. Due to its friendly relationship with Israel, Russia has never provided Syria with air defense systems like the S-300 or S-400 to prevent these attacks from Israel or retaliate afterward. Had Russia and Iran not been rivals in this land, they could have strengthened the Syrian army together and shared responsibilities in monitoring Idlib while bolstering Aleppo's defense capabilities. But if we consider the deeper reasons, the disaster in Aleppo could have been avoided if President Assad had compromised for peace by accepting the draft constitution written by Russia in 2017, which proposed considering both the regime's and the opposition's interests. Now the Assad government has been caught off guard and is in a politically unfavorable situation, while the Syrian military is in a passive position, and the worst may still be yet to come. The hotspot in Syria, particularly Aleppo, could also be a move by foreign powers aiming to shift the balance of power, forcing Russia to focus more on Syria, which could potentially distract them from their efforts in Ukraine. Thank you for following today's commentary. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.